Hello there, welcome to Craft with Fee. So we're doing week 2 today of the Woodland Stitch Along, and we're going to be making a pieced zippy pouch. So we're going to be choosing 4 fabrics, and from each of those 4 fabrics you're going to cut 4 2.5 inch squares. Now I've gone with all these little floral ones that you can see here. I think these ones are called Clara, C-L-A-R-A. I think that's the pattern. So we've got 16 of those. You will also need to cut a strip that is 2.5 inches in width by 10.5 inches in length in another print which goes with them. And then you will need to cut a piece of fusible parlan or wadding to 10.5 inches square. We're also going to need 2 lining pieces. These pieces measure 5.5 by 10.5. So they can just be a homespun or whatever it is that you have laying around. And then we need a piece of hanky linen that is at least 6 to 6.5 inches square, because we need to be able to draw on it 4 2.5 inch squares, and we need to be able to put these 4 stitcheries in it. Now, if you are a member of the Tilted Lovers Club, you will be able to download these 2.5 inch square stitcheries, or you can use stitcheries of your own. Or if you are a member of my SSS Stitchery Club, which you can find at craftwithfee.com, we have stitcheries there every month that are sent out to our club members, so you could use one of those. So what I've done is I've drawn myself a little panel here with 4 2.5 inch squares on it, and I have left a gap in between just in case I needed to trim them down if I muck up cutting them or whatever. So I have then used my iron-on transfers, which were in the accessory kit, which was available about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. But if you don't have the accessory kit with the iron-on transfer, as I said, you can download the pattern sheet from the Tilted Lovers Club, trace the designs into the middle of the 2.5 inch squares. I've used 2 strands of this beautiful embroidery thread from DMC. It's one of their colorist ones called 4523. And it sort of has got a lot of the colours in it which are in the Woodland range. So that's why I chose that one. It's quite pretty. So I've done just a back stitch on this little flower with a satin stitch centre. This has got little lazy daisies for the leaves and a back stitch. The little mushroom has satin stitch dots. And this one here is just done all in back stitch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get my ruler and my rotary cutter, and we're going to trim these stitcheries down to 2.5 inches. So I've drawn the lines on there, which are a pretty good guide, but I will remeasure it as I go. So make sure we've got them at 2.5, so that's sort of slightly out actually, so that's a good thing to measure. You can see there my line's not lined up, so that is absolutely fine. So always use the lines on your ruler to keep measuring and make sure that everything is lined up nice and straight, and then that way you know that your cutting is straight. So there we have our first 2.5 inch square. And that's the next one. So this one I'm actually going to trim back a little bit towards that line. So I've used a white hanky linen that I've stitched on here, and I've used a little bit of a lightweight weave line on the back, but it's up to you what you use. I wouldn't use anything too thick because these are going to form part of a patchwork front. So you may well be able to get away with not using a stabiliser at all, seeing that the stitcheries are only tiny and that you're only using the one colour thread. Normally we pop a stabiliser on there if we're doing a really big stitchery, or if we are changing thread colours and swapping threads over at the back of the work. We don't want it to show through to the front, and that's one of the main reasons we use a stabiliser. So don't stress too much about that. Okay, so just got to grab my little diagram I drew myself of my layout. So it's up to you as to how you lay these out, but what I want you to do, I'll grab my squares here, is to decide where you are going to put your stitcheries. Now we're going to have 2 rows of 5 on either sort of side. So if we grab our 4 colours here like so, there we go. And I'm going to pop a stitchery at position number 2 on the first row, I think. But this is just to show you what I'm going to be doing, but it might not end up being like this. Okay, so that's the first row. And then the second row, we are going to have our 5 again. I'm going to put the stitchery there, like so. So I'm going to pop that one there, and then we'll pop the green one there. Okay, so this is one side of the bag, and then we're going to pop our 2.5 inch by 10.5 inch strip through there once we've joined these 2 together. So what I might do is go and do those 2, come back, and then I'll show you how to attach this middle bar, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so there we go. So we've got our first row here, and then we have our second row here. So what we're going to do is take this over to the ironing board, and we're going to iron the seams of this side. We're going to iron all of those seams in this direction. This next row, we're going to iron all of the seams in this direction, and then we're going to marry them up. Okay, all beautifully and neatly pressed. So what we're going to do now is to turn it over and pop one on top of the other. And you'll see here that the junction of the 2 pieces of fabric will meet. And so you have one seam going this direction, the other seam going in this direction. So what you need to do now is to get them to rub up against one another, and you'll actually feel when they actually nest, so that they're going to have a nice neat join, a 4-point join. Now I'm using fork pins. I get these from kittyrosecottage.com.au, and what the fork pins do is they hold the seam in the right spot, both vertically and horizontally, so when you're sewing it can't move. I tend not to sew directly over the pins anymore because I've broken a few needles that way, but when I get to just before the pin I'll start to slide it out, so that makes the seam sort of not move. So we need to just join them all up as we go along, and you will feel when they nestle down alongside one another, it's like they're supposed to be there. It's like a little marriage. So it's important to take the time to do that, because then you're going to have a lovely pieced look at the end, and you're not going to have seams that aren't matching. And that's just the way of patchwork. A lot of people see it as very daunting, but it's not. It's if you're using a 1/4 inch foot on your machine and all of your seams are 1/4 inch and your measurements at the start and your cutting is correct, you will get a perfect quilt. I mean, you know, they say there's no perfect quilt, but as perfect as can be, I should say. But you will get those lovely junctions at your patchwork. You can see there, that's going to join beautifully. So all 4 pieces of the fabric will join in a lovely little intersection. And that's what it's all about. So then I'm going to, as I said, take this over to the machine and I'll sew these together, and then I'll come back. And there we go. These 2 rows are now sewn together, and I've pressed the seam through the middle. So we have this lovely little pieced section here now. Okay, so now we're going to sew this piece on. So this is the piece that measures 2.5 by 10.5. And you'll see that now that your squares are sewn together, they also measure 10.5. So that is the beauty of these measurements, because they all gel together. So then we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side, but we're actually going to turn it up the other way and make sure that our stitcheries are up the right way, if you know what I mean. So we'll come back anyway and I'll show you what I mean. And just like magic, that is now sewn on. Okay, so imagine that this is going to be the top of your zippy pouch here like this. So you have these stitcheries facing upwards. So now we're just going to turn this around so that they're facing down, because this side here now needs to also be facing up, because it's going to be the other side of our zippy pouch. And this part here is going to be the base. So we are going to arrange our pieces of fabric once again in a lovely coordinating manner. Okay. So we can arrange a stitchery like so, and just come along and just randomly pop them down on the row how you think that you want them. So this one can be here like this. I might just move the placement of these and have a play around with them off camera, but essentially this is the sort of thing that we're going to do. So we're going to do the exact same thing, and we're going to go and sew those rows together, and then we're going to sew them onto the other side of this, and then we'll come back. And there we go. We now have a 10.5 inch square. So you've got your stitcheries looking the right way, depending on which way you turn it. So there you go. Okay, so now what you need to do is to attach that to your piece of fusible wadding, or your wadding or whatever. If you're using just plain wadding and it's not fusible, you can go around the edges with a scant 1/8 of an inch seam and sew it down, or you can also just quilt on the lines here to attach it to your wadding. But you go and do that, and then we'll come back. Okay, so now it's time to start putting this together. So we're going to need to use a zip. Now, of course, it's going to have to be at least 10.5 inches in length, which is around about 27.5 centimetres. I'm using one here. Now, my zip is 16 inches because we can cut off what we don't use. So that's absolutely fine. And I'm using a cream one because even though I've got white hanky linen here, there's cream in the background of the fabric. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter too much about the zip. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop the zip face down onto the top raw edge of our little piece of fabric that we've got sewn together here, and we'll just use clips because it's so much easier than using pins for this. Now, talking about these clips, did you know that there's a right and a wrong way to put them on? Can you see there on the clip, let's have a look here, that there is a flat bottom and then a curved top? That part there is the bottom, so that when you're popping it onto your machine, that the flat bottoms keep your work flat. So that's just a little tip there for you. There we go. Okay. So then we're going to take one of the pieces of lining and find which side is the right side. For me, it doesn't look like it's going to matter too much. And then we're going to lay that on top as well. And then we're also going to clip that down. So it's just a matter of reclipping all the way along here. There we go. So I'll take this over to the machine, and we're going to sew all the way along there. Now, you will be able to feel where the teeth of the zip is, so you can run the side of your foot along there. So just go down there. Now, I have made a bag like this before, and I did mention in that video, which I will now mention again, if you don't get it straight the first time, because sometimes, the machine doesn't like going down the side of this zip, just go back and redo it. Doesn't matter how many times you go down, as long as you get it nice and straight at the end. So don't be too hard on yourself. The insertion of a zip isn't as scary as many people have made it out to be. This is one of the easiest ways to do it. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back. And there we go. Now I've sewn along mine twice just to make sure that I have got it nice and straight. So what we're going to do now is we're going to flip that over like that. Give it a bit of a finger press along that seam. Then we're going to flip that zip over as well. Flip the lining over to the wrong side. And then we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and give it a nice press. And then we're going to top sew all the way along this edge here on the machine. And there we go. So you can see, hopefully on camera there, that it's been sewn all the way along the top. Okay, so we're going to take it now. We're just going to twist it around so that it's with the zip down the bottom here. And then we are going to fold up the bottom like so that we have it like this. So then you have your piece of lining is here like so, okay? So just clip that along. I'm just going to put a couple of clips in there just to hold it for a moment. And then we're going to take our remaining piece of lining, and then we are going to lay that along the top. We're going to clip it all down, and then we're going to take it over to the machine and sew along as we did before. And there we go, all done. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put our hand inside the tube, and we are going to undo this zip. There we go, so that we can turn it around. Now the reason we're doing this is because we need to do exactly what we did to the other one and iron these 2 bits down, and then we're going to top sew along here. And there we go, we've got our top sewn bit there. Okay, so we're going to turn this back now so that it's back in with the right sides together. And then we're going to flip our lining up on both sides so that they're up like so. Okay, and then we're going to pop a couple of clips in on either side, and then we are going to make a mark in the middle of around about 3 inches, so about there, and then we're going to sew from this side through to here, and then from here through to here, so that we have a gap in the middle for turning later on. Okay, there we go. So we have our little opening in here now, ready to go. So now we're going to pop some tabs on, and we're going to put the bag together. So I've got 2 little pieces of ribbon, and they measure 3.5 inches. So what we're going to do, we're going to start on the side of the zipper which does not have the zip pull, and we are going to take this lining and the outer, and the seam that we've done on the bottom there, we're going to line up with the zip, and we're just going to pop a pin in there for the moment. Okay, and then we are going to get our piece of ribbon. So make sure that you've got the right sides of the ribbon facing together. Oops, sorry, the wrong sides of the ribbon facing together. What am I saying? And then the 2 raw edges, and then we're going to pin that over the top of our zip, because we want it to sit directly in the middle of the zip and be our pull. So now you won't be able to put the pin up too high, because you need to be able to sew it down. Now what I like to do at this point is I like to take this over to the machine, and I like to just sew that down with a scant 1/8 of an inch seam, so that then I can remove the pins and it's not too much hassle. So we'll go and do that and I'll come back. And okay, hopefully you can see the stitching there, just right on the edge. So now I can remove that pin, because my little tab is now going to be staying in place. So it needs to be down inside the body of the bag. Now remember that this piece here is our base, so we want to make sure that the centre of this is around about the centre of your zip, so that you know that you've got it right. So what I like to do is to fold it in half just there, and then I've got a nice little fold. Now you can put a pin in that fold, and then you can match it up to the zip here, and then that shows you where the middle is. So you can pop your pin in there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to sew all of these layers together. So I'll just pop a clip in there, and then a clip there, and we're going to sew straight down here with a 1/4 inch seam. And there we go. So I've sewn it twice to make sure I get a nice straight line. So then we're going to come in with our scissors, and we're going to clip off the remainder of that zip, and then we're going to just clip the corners here just a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to flip it over to the other side, and this is the side that has the zipper pull on it. So the first thing that we need to do here is we need to do the exact same thing with our piece of ribbon, but this time we need to make sure that our zip is down into the body of the bag. If you don't have it into the body of the bag and you have it on the outside, you have no way to open your bag. So you need to be very careful with that. Now we need to take a pin here now, and we need to pin the bits of the zipper together so that I'll just close this up a little bit and make sure I've got it about right. Yep. So that the teeth of the zipper are together like that. And it might actually help to put a couple of pins in there at this point to make sure that we've got it right. Now we've got to make sure that it's straight. That's the thing. We don't want any bumps and lumps in our zip. If you can't tell, I have a pin in my mouth. Okay, So that's got it. So we're going to take our piece of ribbon again, the piece that's going to go over our zip. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky, but I know you can do it. And we are going to, actually we might put the lining onto the back of it first because that'll give us something to sink our teeth into, so to speak, put our pin into. So then we're going to lay that up there like that. We're going to pop another pin in there, and then we're going to take it over to the machine, and we're going to just use that 1/8 of an inch scant seam again, just to make sure that we've got it adhered down before we go and do our proper sewing. So now we can remove these pins. Just take those out because you can see that I've got my stitching there. And we can do exactly the same as what we did before. So we're going to find the halfway point on that bottom piece of fabric there. And then I'm going to put a pin in there so I know where the middle is. Now all of these things do matter at the end of the project, because taking the time to line things up right now will make sure that you get a lovely finished project at the end, and that you've taken that extra time to do it does make a huge difference. Okay, so we're just going to pin or clip this one across the top here as we did before, remembering that your zip is in the body of your bag in there. And then we'll come back once it's sewn. Okay, so there you go. So I have actually cut the zip off and I have cut those corners again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this lining in the right way. Okay. So we will turn that in that way, like so. You can use something to poke the corners out if you wish, and as you know, I love a little paintbrush. I think that's the best way to get corners nice and neat. So there we go. And then what we do is we then flip the lining this way so that we can actually see what this bag looks like at this point. Now you may say to yourself, oh, that looks familiar, that looks like the bag we made in the Maple Farm stitch along, although this one's pieced. And you would be right, it's a different size, it's the same shape, but we're going to do something different with this one. We're going to actually box these corners, and I'll show you in a moment how we're going to do that. So let me just point those out. So this is what you've got at this point. Now, of course, you can leave your little zippy pouch like this if you want, because this is now just a little flat zippy pouch, but you've got your stitchery sitting on the bottom, and we really don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this back in this way. So just poke those little corners back out. And we're going to box these corners. But before we do that, we're actually going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to close this little opening here in the lining. Now you can do that by hand if you want. I do advise you to iron it first so that you get a nice neat finish, but I'll go and do that and I'll come back. And there we go, it's all closed up. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are actually going to do a little corner on our corners of our bag, and we're going to sew across them. Now that's going to give you a box look. Now you can trim that off if you want. I'm not going to trim mine off because I do not want any raw edges. I want it just to be nicely closed so that if I need to wash it, it's not going to fray. But truly, it doesn't matter either way. You're not going to see inside the corners of this bag, but I just want a really neat finish for me. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to take the corner. I'll show you once again. We're going to take the corner like that, and then we're going to poke our hand in there, and we're going to make sure that this seam is up through the middle. And then we're going to take our ruler, and then we are going to measure. Wrong way, I need an inch. We're going to measure, pop that line on your ruler up on the seam line there so that you know you've got it nice and straight. So as I said before, you always use your ruler to line things up, okay? Now I'm going to use a friction marker because it will be removed with heat, and I am going to draw a line along there, which is a full inch from the corner of the bag there, like that. Okay, and then I'm going to pop a couple of pins in there. And then I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew along that line. But then I'm going to repeat this same thing for all 4 of the corners. So I'll just show you one more time on this side so I can take the 2 to the machine at the same time. So I'm going to line up the line on my ruler with my seam line. This is the 1 inch mark here, so the 1 inch is right on the corner. I'm then going to take my marker and I am going to draw down there. And then I'm going to pop some pins in it and then I'm going to take it over to the machine and I am going to sew across it. Now, as I said, you can do that for all 4 corners and then we'll come back. Okay, there we go. So we have all of our corners sewn and I'll just got a few bits of cotton here left to trim. Now, as I said, at this point, if you want to trim these back, you can. It'll take away some of the bulk in the corners of your little bag. I'm not going to do that for mine. I'm just going to leave them, but entirely up to you. Totally personal choice. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to turn it through to the right side. Okay? So you won't need to press those corners too much because they will already press, and you'll see that hopefully you've got a nice junction there on your corner. Doesn't matter if you don't. Look, I've got one here that's a little bit off, but that's fine. It's absolutely fine. You're not going to notice it in the scheme of things. Okay, so effectively what you've done is you've gone from having a little flat zippy pouch to now having one that has actually got a bottom. And you can see here, this is the reason I've put the strip down through the bottom, because that is going to be your bottom, the bum of your bag. So you can see there, that is now the bottom strip. Okay, so all that's left to do now for me is to pop a little zipper pull. And I've been asked so many times, where do you get your zipper pulls from? Well, I get them from eBay. Just put in your search bar zipper pulls or parrot clasps, something like that, and you'll find you'll get some beautiful little pulls. And I've got a lovely little flower here that I'm now going to attach to mine. So it's it takes a little bit of work, this little pouch, but it's so worth it. It is totally worth the effort in the end. So I'm just going to pop this little clasp. Oh gosh, I'm all thumbs today. It must mean I need another coffee, I think. And that noise is my iron. Okay, so there you go. So that little flower is on there, and of course it matches this little flower here on my little pouch. So I hope that you give this a go, and I'd love to see what you've done. Don't forget to pop a photo of them in the group. If you don't already follow me here on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and I'll chat with you in the group soon. Bye for now.